Well, yeah, we were counting on Joe for the big hair, and then he was unable to make it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in case you haven't noticed, we are actually live. And I'll give people a minute to join us. But welcome, Internet and Facebook and all our lovely friends at home. I am your distracted host, Gary Mitchell, co-director of the American Sci-Fi Classics Track. And we are here to talk about a titan of 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s television, Mr. Stephen J. Cannell. And if you were a child of the 80s, there's no way you did not know that man or his work. Joining me on the interweb machine here, we have first from the lovely 42 cast, Mr. Nathan Laws. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Laws. I am the host of the 42 cast, like Gary mentioned, and that is, excuse me, I'm getting over COVID. But that is your ultimate answer to fandom, geekiness, and everything, where we just talk about random stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, then listen to us.
And below us, supporting us, as always, the wind beneath my wings, because he had the chili. It is Mr. Kevin.
I think that wind came from a rubber chicken.
That could be. Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Kevin. Great to be back on the Classics Track. I am also, like Nathan, a podcaster. In fact, both of our shows are part of the ESO network. And my show is the Flopcast, which is very silly and goofy. And as of next week, we will have been doing the Flopcast for 10 years.
Wow.
Every week for 10 years. And we do obsess over a lot of 70s, 80s pop culture nostalgia. And I spent the 70s and 80s just staring at the stupid TV. And so it was just a cavalcade of Cannell. It was Stephen J. Cannell Productions nonstop.
Mm-hmm. It's like I can still, like, without any effort, hear the
a little closing production song. Yeah.
Yes. So, Kevin won the coin toss. I will.
All right.
That was happened in my head that he had no idea who was a part of. So if anybody doesn't actually know from what we just said, who was Stephen J. Cannell?
Yeah, Stephen J. I think it's Cannell. I think it rhymes with panel. I've heard it pronounced both ways, but I heard him pronounce it Cannell. So I'm going to go with Stephen J. Cannell. And yeah, I mean, I think he would call himself a writer more than anything, although he became a giant in television as a producer, of course. But he was a guy that in the 60s, late 60s into the 70s wanted to become a writer and eventually set his sights on television and broke into TV writing. His big break was on Adam 12, and worked on some Jack Webb series like that, and then eventually started creating his own shows. The big one was the Rockford Files, his first big successful TV creation. And he created and produced and wrote a lot of TV through the 70s. And by the end of the 70s, he went to work for himself instead of creating and producing things for another production company like Universal or Paramount or whatever. He started his own Stephen J. Cannell Productions and kept everything in-house and just kept on creating big hit TV shows, mostly action, adventure, detective kind of stuff, and was just responsible for the list goes on and on and on. Just a massive TV creator and producer, as Gary said, through the 70s, 80s, 90s.
And Nathan, how would you say were his biggest hits?
Well, I mean, for me, it's got to be number one, the A-Team.
Yes.
Which, growing up, was one of my favorite television shows. And I still think holds up kind of well. I just got through watching it not too recently, like 5 years ago or so. I rewatched it, and I was pretty happy with it. I was still pretty amused by it. You know, obviously there are the things everybody makes fun of, but it's a really good show. But the other one for me that I absolutely love is The Greatest American Hero.
Oh yes.
Yeah, those I'm with you, Nathan. Those are the two big ones for me.
Yeah, it's those. It's like he made so many, but I like those are the two giants. I also have a very very soft spot in my heart for Riptide.
Yep.
Which had the giant pink helicopter, the boat, and one of TV's first nerds. The modern nerd, that is. He was the computer guy. He had a robot. He had the glasses. And it was like, oh, I could be a cool action hero too.
Yeah, this was kind of post, Revenge of the Nerds. Kind of, there was a definite nerd type in place, and so yeah, let's do a nerd on Riptide, and the robot. You're not kidding. You saw a lot of the robot. Just you watch the opening credits, and there's this goofy robot rolling around through the whole thing, which I'm a huge fan of goofy 80s robots.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was so many of those shows that like there were set pieces. He wouldn't just do a regular show. So many of his shows were detectives or private investigators, but there'd be a hook. There'd be something to set it apart. And for Riptide, it was the boat. It was these guys work out of a boat. Plus, they've got cool cars and helicopters and robots.
Yes, as Lynn points out, the flying Mimi.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the era where the vehicle was the main character in a lot of shows, because you had Knight Rider, you had Airwolf. It's like, you would have the show built around the idea of here's this really awesome vehicle, and these are the people around that vehicle.
Yep, and a lot of Cannell shows were like that. You could even look at Stingray, and even Hardcastle and McCormick was all about look at the cool car that we have, and a bunch of shows of his you could say that about, certainly.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was a time when it's a lot of this stuff looks dated in retrospect. A lot of kind of action adventure TV of the 70s and 80s. You watch it now, and it's just there were 3 networks, so we're going to stare at something on TV, and it was so many just long scenes of car chases and explosions and cars rolling over in slow motion and that kind of thing. So you always got plenty of that.
One of the things that I noticed in rewatching Greatest American Hero and the A-Team was how much music they would put into it, where they would have like a, minute and a half, 2-minute scene of just like the character doing something with like music playing in the background. And so it almost seemed like it was like a showcase also for like, hey, here's like, some hit or whatever, song, or I don't know if it was his friends or whatever, because there weren't songs that like necessarily were ones that are big that I remember. But he would put music in the episodes.
Absolutely, and music was hugely important to Cannell Productions, and the name that you'll see in the credits again and again is Mike Post. And Mike Post was the composer that he worked with through his whole career, and who composed most of the theme songs for most Cannell Productions. Those are Mike Post songs, and most of just scoring the music that you hear through the whole show. That was one guy, and I think during Rockford Files that Cannell came to Mike Post saying, hey, they're not paying you enough. And he said, like, your music is like a character in this show. And so he really, the name would always be up front and center in the opening credits. There'd be a big credit for Mike Post and all Cannell's productions. So yeah, music, you're absolutely right, Nathan. Music was a huge part of those shows.
Well, yeah, and the A-Team, that theme is so iconic.
Yeah.
And it's so good. I mean, even using the bullet fire as part of the sound for the introduction, the do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah. They never hurt anybody with their bullets, so they might as well use the bullets to punch up the music a little bit.
Yeah, a musical sting.
I feel like there should be music playing under the whole panel. Yeah, and not only was the music a character, every show, like we were just talking about the A-Team there, everybody had a motif. There was like, it's a face scene. Oh, it's a BA scene. Oh, it's the helicopter scene. There was always for the A-Team, there was always okay, now we're making the whatever vehicle we're making this week montage music. And it's like, you knew then it was on.
Oh, I mean, A-Team, it was practically a cartoon in many ways. And so I think that show, more than any, maybe Greatest American Hero, neck and neck, but as far as appealing to kids, I think more so than most of his shows were very much aimed at adults. Rockford Files, which was his first big hit, that's a show for adults. I mean, kids can watch it. It's fine. But
Yeah.
A-Team was very cartoony. And I loved it. It hit me. It was that I was certainly the right age to me, and my goofy friends were obsessed with the A-Team and couldn't wait to talk about it. Once a week, the next day in school, we couldn't believe what a great show this is.
Well, that was lightning in a bottle because of the characters, right? I mean, they just nailed the chemistry of the 4 characters. I mean, after they got rid of that initial face that was just in the pilot, which nobody talks about, but once you got Dirk Benedict, mixed in with Dwight Schultz and Mr. T, and my God, I'm blanking on Hannibal's real
George
name.
Papard.
Thank you. They just gelled together so well. And you hear about behind the scenes stuff where George Papard didn't get along with them well, whatever. But you can't tell that watching their show. You don't feel that. You feel like they all love Crazy Hannibal, and they get kind of annoyed by him sometimes, but they're all friends. And
I mean, George Papard was a pro, and he did the job, and he did a great job. Yeah, I think the story is that he was told this was his show, and the other guys would be kind of supporting him, and then it turned out to be much more. Well, Mr. T was the draw. Everybody was obsessed with Mr. T, of course, and so it wasn't.
And then Murdoch was a breakout, and Well, and that's the thing is this was Papard's 4th TV series. He'd always been the lead guy, Banachek, and and he'd done movies. So and in a way, a lot of people forget back in the 80s, TV was a step down. If you've been a movie actor, you didn't do TV, and if you were a TV actor, you weren't going to make it until you made it as the big screen. So he was kind of stepping down. But like you say, Kevin, they told him, no, it's your show. Then it should have been called Hannibal.
Right.
It was definitely though aimed at that 10 to 14-year-old set, because I don't know a single kid when I was a kid who did not love that show.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was a day in school. I remember going to school and English class, and our poor teacher could not get control of the class because we were all so excited, just discussing amongst ourselves what had happened on A-Team the night before. And she actually gave up, stopped the class, and said, "All right, apparently the A-Team was very interesting last night," and just picked a kid to just describe the plot of last night's A-Team to the whole class. That's the impact the show was having.
Hey, that's not bad though. Try to work it into something that then can be part of a class discussion or something.
That's why I have no idea what a preposition is to this day. It's because we just focused on A-Team in my junior high English class.
But you can definitely weld a rebar to a tractor.
Yeah. If you lock me in a barn
in under 20 minutes.
If I'm hiding in a barn with a lot of welding equipment and power tools around me, I can put something together. Yes.
Absolutely. But I think that was what made Cannell's productions work, to not just make this all about the A-Team, which we could do. Is he had a really good gift for coming up with characters like that, very memorable characters. Jim Rockford is one of the greatest characters on TV. I mean, period. He's one of the top detectives, and he's so many up until him. So many PIs were the rough, or they were the tumble, they were the Banacheks, they were the Mannix, they were the man of action. I went back to start rewatching Rockford Files a few years ago when it was on Netflix. In the very first episode, you see he's broke. He's down on his luck. The big guy comes in to rough him up. And in most of the action detective shows at the time, there'd have been a big fight. He goes and hides in the bathroom with a roll of quarters in his fist and sucker punches the guy. And then throw some water on I think he also throws some water on the floor so the guy would even slip. I mean, he was very practical.
I just rewatched
no one's seen anything like that.
Gary, I watched that first episode earlier today because I hadn't seen any Rockford Files in a while. So yeah, I watched the first half of the TV movie pilot. So yeah, I saw that crazy scene ambushing the guy in the bathroom just a couple hours ago. And yeah, that was Cannell's thought was, instead of the super powerful, ultra cool unstoppable leading man hero type. No, what if he's a regular guy who's trying to avoid trouble at all costs, and he's down on his luck, and he's all hung up on getting paid and constantly reciting how much it costs to hire him and making sure is the check going to clear, and it lives in that filthy, dilapidated trailer.
Yeah.
And it worked. And obviously Jim Garner, you've got a guy with just bursting with charisma and personality, and made that part work the way Maverick did. That was really set it apart. And that was, as you said, Cannell was, it can't just be the concept, it has to be the character, because what's the concept? Concept is private detective. Okay, that's only going to take you so far.
Yeah, and he surrounded him again with a great supporting cast. His dad, Angel. Angel's one of my favorite characters on TV. I mean, he's just the ultimate little lovable weasel.
That pilot episode, the woman that hires him in the pilot, that was Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman. A couple of years before Bionic Woman, that was the first person to hire Jim Rockford was the Bionic Woman. And actually, Bill Mumy from Lost in Space actually has a small part in that pilot as well. So they're always great with their casting.
But again, what attracted to me besides those characters and is that grounded. It felt like we're following around a real guy in modern LA at the time. I mean, it's a period piece now, but at the time it was very cutting edge, modern day. This is Los Angeles. And it didn't sugarcoat it.
Yep. And on that theme of what if it was a real guy, that he carried that into Greatest American Hero.
Yes.
Which was really the only supernatural or science fiction based kind of show that he ever did, I think, that I can think of. And he was resisting it when the idea of can you develop a superhero show was brought to him. He didn't want to do it. And that's what got him thinking about it was, what if it's not like a Superman type? What if it's not a big, strong, perfect super? What if it was, what would really happen if a regular guy was suddenly saddled with superpowers, and how would that affect his life? Probably not for the best. That was the kind, and that was the hook that made him interested in doing a show like that.
Yeah, you got that. They only filmed a few flying shots, right, and just replayed them through the episodes. But the whole thing with him, fumbling around in the air because he couldn't quite control it and everything. You would see that all the time, and you always got. The thing he had no idea what he was doing or what powers his suit had, and
it just upends and disrupts and practically ruins your life getting stuck with a weird alien super suit. It's just your life is just a nonstop series of problems and misunderstandings, and your girlfriend's freaking out, and you're caught in public wearing this ridiculous suit all the time. It was awful, but and again the casting. Just such brilliant casting that William Catt made that character work, and then surrounding him with Connie Selica and Robert Culp, you could just watch in anything.
Oh yeah.
So, my wife and I still quote that because she had never seen it. She's a few years younger than me, so she had never seen Greatest. So I showed her that. I showed her A-Team. She hadn't seen either one, and we still sometimes quote lines one of the things that oh god, I forget his name, but Robert Culp's character says music nowadays has too many notes. So if there's some music we don't like, we're too many notes.
Yeah, Robert Culp, Bill Maxwell, the FBI character,
Bill Maxwell.
Was I mean, every line, every expression is just a gem. It's just fiercely entertaining. That guy was amazing.
One of the things that sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I really like about the Cannell Productions, at least it's true about Greatest American Hero and the A-Team, is it wasn't they weren't afraid to reinvent themselves if they felt like things weren't working. Because Greatest American Hero season 3 is very different from the first two seasons, and you can tell Ralph's a little more mature and a little more, he's come a long way. And so it's even though there's not arcs in the sense that we consider them today, it does feel like there's been a sense of time and things have progressed. Obviously A-Team season 5, huge departure. where they brought in the whole idea of they were caught by the government. Now they're like basically the Suicide Squad for the government. And it's like, you know, like we'll send you into these situations and we'll disavow all knowledge of you if you don't succeed.
Working for Robert Vaughn.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. episode that they did in the 5th season was hilarious. Like I kept laughing because they did like all the things, like, you know, they did all these homages to the Man from U.N.C.L.E., which I thought was great. But getting back to Greatest American Hero, there was an episode in the 3rd season that really surprised me because this is in the middle of the, you know, scare of D&D as, you know, corrupting children and everything. They did an episode that was, they didn't call it D&D. I think they called it Magicians and Mazes or something like that. But it's basically, you could tell it was D&D. But it was all about like Ralph's wife gets really into, like, she starts reading the rule book. And you know, she starts like getting really into it, and she's like, wow, this game, it's so like well developed, and it like would help teach kids like how to, like, you know, how to take like leadership and, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, wow, elucidating all the things like, you know, we say about role playing and why role playing is like a positive thing and whatnot, and like saying it in an early 80s, you know, 83, you know, what, you know, like TV show. And I was like, wow, that was a really neat kind of just vignette to just have in the Greatest American Hero of all things. But I really appreciated that.
Well, like we were talking about, one of the things that makes his show stand out, even when they have a guy in a flying red supersuit, is grounding it with stuff like that, bringing in real world notes. I mean, mind you, in the A-Team, the world, apparently America, there's an orphanage on the brink of going bankrupt in every town in America.
Well, it was a Western, but set in the 1980s, you know, but it was a lot of that thought of the drifters going from town to town, righting wrongs and, you know, helping the widows and the orphans.
Yeah. Yep.
But it was always wild, and it's in the opening bit of it, though, that these guys are mercenaries, you know, if you can afford them and if you can find them.
Yep.
And, you know, and 9 times out of 10, they would always, you know, they wouldn't really take the money, but they were always like, you know, can you, again, with like Rockford, can the check clear? And the guts to do a show and make it lighthearted of guys who survived Vietnam and accused of a crime they didn't commit, which I always took as the implication of like, they apparently like, I think the implication was supposed to be that they stole something, but the current, you know, it was like did they shoot some people they weren't supposed to shoot? But, you know, fun.
Yeah, it was for such a cartoony show to have that the dark origin story involving Vietnam, which was, you know, only a decade previously that when the show started. It was interesting that they put that, attempted at least to add that depth to it. You know, meanwhile, they're supposed to be in hiding and they're driving around in the most recognizable van you could possibly have, tooling around Los Angeles.
Yeah, and I mean, Hannibal's an actor, and BA, like, he's not trying to fit in anywhere. You know?
Yeah, I got the impression that like Face was like running scams and things, so he probably had some money-making scams running on the side that would keep them funded while they were often, you know, taking kind of charity cases and not getting paid for most of what we saw them doing every week.
Yeah, they showed them get paid often enough that you could sort of squint and say, okay, well, that was enough for that. You know, they got $10,000 this week, even though the next like 10 weeks they didn't get paid, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Because them orphans ain't got no money.
Right.
Yeah, but it was that kind of that fugitive format was kind of a long tradition in TV at that point of going town to town while you're on the run, which, you know, The Fugitive and Incredible Hulk and so on. So A-Team was sort of in that tradition. Cannell did that again with Renegade some years later, which was sort of a modern day Western fugitive type of a thing also.
Yeah, but I'm going to run down just a list of some of his other shows here. There was The Quest, where there's the potential heirs to the throne of a monarchy.
Yeah, that one
was just a wild one.
That did not last long. Yeah, weird premise. It was like some little European country was going to be folded in to become part of France or something, unless a successor to the throne could be found. So that they found these Americans who were distant relatives of some royalty. That it was weird, difficult concept, and I don't know that it didn't last long. I mean, Cannell has an amazing batting average overall, but when you're
Yeah.
producing shows, so many shows, they're not all going to be long running hits. Although
Well, he's
a lot
just
of them
flinging the
were.
pages off the typewriter.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised because in my memory, I would have sworn A-Team came first, but actually, Greatest American Hero came first. That was
Yes.
81. A-Team
Yep.
was 83.
Yeah,
I
'cause
must have seen.
Greatest American Hero. That was the name Hinckley,
Yeah.
which was tragically mistimed with the assassination attempt on the president, and where the assassin had the same name. That was 1981.
My personal favorite, 10 Speed and Brown Shoe from 1980, where
That's
they
right.
desperately tried to make Jeff Goldblum a TV star.
Jeff Goldblum and Ben Vereen.
Yes.
Private
As a
Detective.
kid, I was 9 years old. I was into it. I was very heartbroken when it didn't continue.
That was a good show. Yeah, it did not last long, like half a season, I think.
Yeah. But then the other big one I think everybody always thinks about is Hardcastle and McCormick, where you have a judge who's like, all these bad guys got away from me. I got this ex-con with a heart of gold, so I'm going to give him a very expensive car.
That was a similar premise to 10 Speed and Brown shows. It was like 3 years later, he tried it again with Hardcastle and McCormick, and it was one guy was on parole. That was the same as Ben Vereen was a guy on parole who had to work as a private investigator. Hardcastle and McCormick, it was Brian Keith was the judge, the older judge guy who I knew from Family Affair. He was the father on the goofy old sitcom Family Affair way many years earlier.
Yep. And Dan Kelly, and he had the fancy car because he was a ex-race car driver. Then we've already mentioned Riptide. And then I think his other biggest hit from this era, Hunter.
Yep.
Which, was your dirty, hairy, but way toned down for TV.
Yeah. The football star, Fred Dryer.
Yes. And I literally, it was, if for anybody who never seen it, he's that cop on the edge, but as edgy as you can get in 1980s television. He's not quite gunning down the guys in the street, but boy, you can tell he wants to.
Yep.
And then into the 90s, he kept going. And
well, I think even we're still in the 80s, we probably don't want to skip over 21 Jump Street.
That was where I was going next. 21
okay.
Jump Street. 21 Jump Street, which was one of the defining shows of Fox when it first started.
Absolutely. Early Fox network.
It was a franchise because it spawned spin-offs too.
Yeah, Booker. Richard Grieco got his own series called Booker.
Yeah, they tried so hard to make him the next Johnny Depp. I felt so bad for him because I actually liked him. I thought he was a pretty good actor. He did that spy movie. I forget the name of it, where he was this teenage kid who gets sucked into being a spy. It was a fun little movie. But it made Johnny Depp a household name.
Yep.
And gave us Peter DeLuise, who would go on to become, a mega producer for like Stargate and everything. And like I said, this is between 21 Jump Street and Married with Children is the reason we have Fox as a network.
Oh yeah. Like there were some of the shows that they thought were really going to carry the network were like Werewolf and Mr. President, Mr. President with George C. Scott. Like those were the big marquee shows they were really pushing, and it was surprisingly it was Married with Children and 21 Jump Street, and then of course The Simpsons, spinning out of Tracy Ullman.
Right, but Simpsons wasn't there from the very beginning. But
no. Well, as part of Tracy Ullman, it was, but
yeah.
But Cannell was certainly a huge part of launching an entire new network because Jump Street was such a hit.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Jump Street, Nathan?
It's been a long time, so I did definitely watch it. My brothers were way more into it than I was. They were probably like 10, 11 when it came out, and I was more like 6, 7. So yeah, I mean, but I remember it being like, like it was a show we watched, and I remember it being like kind of interesting because they were supposed to be like high school kids, but they were cops, and
right.
It was undercover police.
Undercover police in the high
secretly
school.
Posing as high school students, which is
right.
What a great concept, though. I mean, that's a show that I never got into, but again, I'm impressed by here's another killer concept from Cannell, in that it's what a great combination to be able to do more police detective stuff, but in a high school. So now you've got a high school setting and teenagers and stuff. So
Yeah, and
well, yeah, and I mean, I can say for my brother's reactions to it, like it got its target audience. Like it
Yep.
got the the late tween to teen audience,
Oh,
because everybody
absolutely.
was watching it. And like I say, it was a big enough show that they were able to launch a spinoff too, even though I don't think
yeah,
Booker lasted anywhere near
it
as long.
No.
But
yeah,
yeah.
it didn't. I was in high school at the time, so I was right that target group, and
hmm
getting over the ludicrous part of the concept of these are 20-year-old cops pretending to be 16-year-old guys.
Hey, that's
They
every
did
high school
hire
show on TV. It's 20
right.
somethings playing high schoolers.
hmm But I mean, there was a magnetism to depth. You liked, Peter DeLuise. You liked him as a character, and the plots were just modern enough. The dealing with what was going on, that it actually felt like actual. It wasn't, a lot of the shows when they're doing high school, you can tell the writers are in their 30s, remembering what it was like when they were in high school. And this actually felt like more like an actual 80s high school. And I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I would watch it when it was on. And I remember one episode where Johnny Depp's character's girlfriend gets killed in a robbery at a convenience store. I mean, he's off duty. He's just there with her, trying to buy something. The mugger panics, kills the girlfriend, and his character just goes into this spiral. And I just remember watching the episode and going, "This guy's good." I mean, it was mind blowing to me that how good he was. But then he went on to do Stingray, which is one of my favorite shows of his. Where we have the drifter going town to town, but he had the hook of he had a Stingray car, very, very cool car. But he would do things to help people, but he didn't take money. He would say, "I will help you in this situation, but you're going to owe me a favor. And one day in the future, I'm going to come to you and cash in that favor. And whatever it is, you're going to help me."
So yeah, he had like these kind of a community of like secret operatives that he could draw from, experts in whatever field he needed assistance in, just because of all the people he'd helped over the years. It was a clever concept to be able to bring in guests and situations. It was and a very strange concept, but fun.
It was a strange concept, but it's cool because, like you said, it was a great way to, I need to do a thing. Oh, I'll go. And so there was always this hint of mystery, and they really played up the, who was he? What was his past? Why is he doing this now?
Yeah. Kind of reminiscent of The Shadow almost in that way. I mean, the Shadow,
that's what I was thinking when you were saying that. I was like,
Shadow had
that's like
agents working with him, and it was mysterious.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The people who owe him that then become his agents, right? Exactly, that he saved previously.
Yeah. And I really cannot stress enough the cool car. And then he also went on to do J.J. Starbuck, billionaire Texan wearing cowboy boots, crime drama again. Wise Guy, I think, is the other one. That's, I think, one that everybody. I mean, that one got a lot of awards, a lot of attention.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Talk about it, Kevin.
I don't remember it too well. I don't think I saw very much Wise Guy. It was an undercover guy, FBI or police or whatever, who was undercover with the mob, I believe. Ken Wall was the leading man.
Do you remember it, Nathan?
I don't even remember the title.
Okay. All right. So let me get on my box again. Because this, again, was one of my favorites. He was, it was a undercover guy trying to get into the mob. And, he did his time, he was undercover cop. He actually did like 4 years in prison to build his ID, and they inserted him into the mob. And I believe it's the first season. His main mob boss he's going after is played by a guy by the name of Kevin Spacey.
Oh, wow.
And one of his first major roles where everybody started paying attention to, hey, this guy is pretty good. And it's the whole, how far does he go as the undercover cop, pretend to be in the mob to get the information, to get this guy, to set him up. And they really, again, it was gritty for the time. Now it's not as gritty, but at the time it was very realistic and lots of shades of gray. And it went on for, I think, 3 seasons. But my favorite season is the one where, you could tell they were clutching at straws. They send him undercover into the music business to undercover scams and payola stuff. And Tim Curry is one of the main bad guys. And it's a phenomenal season.
I saw when I looked up Wise Guy, I saw that his, I didn't know this, his FBI supervisor was played by Jonathan Banks, who I love. So now I kind of want to go back and check out Wise Guy. We've been rewatching, like, people would know Jonathan Banks from as Mike on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. That guy who's always fantastic. So I kind of do want to see this one now.
Yeah, I mean, like what you were talking about before, Gary, with the or I think maybe Kevin too, about the great concepts that Cannell came out. Like you guys are talking about these things, and I came on here expecting a much bigger panel, and I would get to sit in the background, just pipe up for A-Team and Greatest American Hero. But these concepts sound interesting. Like, oh, I like the idea of the guy wandering around getting favors. That sounds kind of neat. I like this idea of the guy that's building up a deep cover to go and be inserted into like the mob and stuff like that. That sounds kind of a neat idea. So, I mean, like, really good concepts.
Yeah, it's definitely one to hunt down. And then he did Unsub, which was the first, it was Criminal Minds before Criminal Minds.
Right.
Top of the Hill, which was a political drama about the White House.
That was William Catt.
Yep.
That was Cannell working with the Greatest American Hero, William Catt again. But yeah, now William Catt is a congressman.
Yep. Then he did Broken Badges, police procedural.
I remember Broken Badges. Yeah, that was Miguel Ferrer was the star of that, and that was like problem police officers who had been relieved of their normal duties for various issues, and they kind of band it all together to form their own wacky crime fighting unit.
They're all loose cannons.
Yes,
right.
But I mean, Miguel Ferrer is always so fun to watch, though. So that was didn't last long, but again, that's a guy that I'd watch in anything.
Palace Guard. Then he did Scene of the Crime, which again was it was apparently part of the light crime time after a prime time late night block.
Yeah,
and
that
it
was
had
when...
instead of had a regular cast, they had a regular cast, but they always played different people. Kevin.
Yep. Yeah, that was CBS. Yeah, it was CBS. They thought, what if we did drama series late at night when normally it's just talk shows and stuff late at night? Let's try doing drama series after regular prime time. And I think it was in part it was done to hold that slot for when they could make a run at getting David Letterman to fill that spot, which ultimately they did. But meanwhile, Cannell produced at least a couple of shows for them. Scene of the Crime was one of them. Silk Stockings was the other one.
Yes.
And that's the one that ended up running
and
forever.
Forever Night.
Yes. Silk Stockings ran through the entire 90s, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
It ran a couple of years on CBS, and then when Letterman took over that spot, it moved to the USA Network. And then just, on USA Network, they're like, yeah, we'll run this thing
we'll run this into the ground.
I never watched an episode, but I remember the commercials on USA constantly.
Oh, sure. Because again, the concept was they just make it sexy. It was, this is late night CBS, so we're going to get a little naughtier. I mean, it's still network TV, so it wasn't like HBO, but it was a guy and a girl, good looking people, but they were private investigators, but they only investigated crimes of passion.
Yes. Let's see. Then he did The Commish, which was a juggernaut in the 90s.
Yep.
And then he did Street Justice. Carl Weathers getting his shot at his TV gig. Silk Stockings, we just discussed. And then one of our commenters said that their favorite show was this one, The Hat Squad.
Right. Hat Squad. This was like adopted. It was a policeman, I think, but he adopted some orphan boys who became their own elite crime fighting unit. They wore matching hats. And Hat Squad, I think, was sort of a reference to like an old timey reference to police officers or something. But these guys, young guys, wearing hats and fighting crime. The Hat Squad. Come on.
Some concepts are better than others.
Yes. And
There was
then
another one in
another.
there, another one that I learned about just looking up Cannell today that totally was off my radar was Hawkeye. Not last year's Hawkeye, but Cannell had Cannell was there first with a series called Hawkeye, and this was a period piece. It was set in the French and Indian War era, you know, like 18th century, and one of the stars was Linda Carter. Yeah, so I was like, "Yikes! How did I miss that?"
And see how many episodes it ran for.
Not many.
Right, exactly. That's how you missed it.
Yep.
But one that did get a long good run on USA, Renegade with Lorenzo Lamas.
Yep.
Who was your discount Antonio Banderas. Which, again, he was a renegade cop. You know, again, going from he's a, you know, he was a good cop until he testified against dirty cops, and then they made him a bounty hunter because, you know, bounty hunters were always cool. And
that was Cannell. Cannell was trying to do a modern Western with that. And again, it was the fugitive format. It was he's on the run and he's helping people along the way. But it was very much in the Western tradition, but a modern Western. He motorcycle instead of a horse, but it was like a Lone Ranger thing. He had a Native American partner as well, like the Lone Ranger.
Wow.
And Stephen Cannell himself had a regular recurring part on Renegade also. He did a little acting here and there just for fun, including a long-running character as part of Renegade.
And then he did, again, he had a theme. He knew where his strengths were. He did Cobra with Michael Dudikoff from American Ninja as a former Navy SEAL who went AWOL, and now he's out proving, you know, he's undercover finding the innocent and all this. I mean, the guy knew his strengths.
They all kind of blend together at some point. You know, it's like we're feeding Cannell plots into an AI at this point. It's just spitting them back out at us.
Yeah. But, you know, like I said, it's maybe these all are very, very similar. But again, the guy knew what his strengths were and he played into them. And he's got a better batting average than most, especially considering how much he put out.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of, a lot of it falls into formula 80s, 90s action adventure series. And fine, there's a place for that. And they did very well. But then so much of his work was a cut above that. And so much of the things that are so fondly remembered, the monster hits like Rockford Files and A-Team and Greatest American Hero. And so much of his stuff really did have a heart to it and really did have the characters and the concepts that really made them special. So it's easy to chuckle at the goofiness of it all, that the Stingrays and Renegades and Cobras and on it goes. But there's some great stuff in there as well.
Yeah, and I'll also say it's an argument for episodic television because, you know, nowadays that everything's moving arcish, you know, and in a lot of ways the arc is superior and that allows you to tell a longer story, and so you can have, you know, more, you know, emotion, you can get more drama out of it. But one of the fun things about watching like an A-Team or a Greatest American Hero is the variety that you can get out of those shows, because every episode is its own scenario. You can play with genres, you can play with settings, you can do all sorts of different, and it's not just set pieces, you know, you can actually really change the tone all over the place too. Yeah. So like, yeah, a lot of the episodes are kind of formulaic, but then they also have some outliers. They actually did a super fight episode towards the end of Greatest American Hero, whereas before it was always just Ralph as the lone person with superpowers and he just didn't know what he was doing. But towards the end there was this thing where like these people created almost like this Frankenstein monster kind of thing, and they actually did the thing with like Ralph fighting somebody in his own strength class, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's something we haven't seen before on their show. But again, it was just a way of varying things up and, you know, doing something that was interesting because the formula was getting kind of old. With Greatest American Hero. Yeah,
one of my favorite, I mean, the show lives in my brain. I mean, a lot of these shows just imprinted, and I'll never forget like the one episode where he was trying to take off to fly, and there's this 8-year-old kid who looks at him and he goes, 3 running steps. And what? And the kid goes, Superman always takes 3 running steps. And he's like, get out of here, what do you know, go away. He tries to, and then a little bit later in the episode he's like looks around, always around, and he tries the 3 running steps, and It works
Yep.
perfectly.
The beauty of that show, though, is in the conceit that it's because he doesn't have the instruction manual. You know, like the
Yes.
idea that it's like there's an instruction manual, and if he just had that, everything would be fine. But he doesn't have that, and so it's not.
Yeah, it's like I love the episode where the aliens come back to see how he's doing, basically.
Mhm.
Give him another copy of the manual, and he's reading it, and he goes, I can shrink. And he does the shrink, and he sets the book down, and he practices, and he re-enlarges, and the book! But the suit was basically an excuse to give him whatever power he needed at the moment to solve whatever that episode was. So it was a great little MacGuffin, just like, the fast car, so they could always do the car chase episode. In Riptide, there was always a boat chase, and then they always would need the helicopter for something. Hardcastle, McCormick, there were and again, the car chase reached its peak as an art form, I think, in the 80s, at least on television.
Yes.
But we're kind of coming up on time. So do we have any other... talking about the man himself, he seemed to be very generous. He always was giving the people a chance. He was always hiring out people. And he always seemed to have a really good attitude towards himself. He wasn't, pretentious, high and mighty. He did a wonderful recurring cameo, I think, on Castle.
Right. Yeah, it was like a poker buddy or
himself.
something on that show. Yeah. I guess the other major aspect of his career that we don't want to leave out is he built up himself as a huge success in television, and then he knew when to get out. I mean, he never completely extracted himself from TV, but he saw the business changing as the 90s wore along. TV was changing, and the networks were not as interested in buying shows that were produced and owned by independent producers anymore. They wanted to do their own stuff and own everything and distribute everything. So that the studio that he'd built into one of the biggest studios in Hollywood. He was having trouble sustaining that because it was not as easy to sell shows to the networks anymore. And so he sold his studio and kind of backed out of being such a major TV producer at that point. And he turned back to his typewriter because he started out, he wanted to be a writer, and he kind of fell into TV production as a result of writing. And he thought, all right, well, now how do I keep writing? And he started writing novels and very successfully. He was a writer after all those years and could still just sit down at the typewriter and bang out novels like mysteries and suspense thriller kind of novels. In the early 2000s, somewhere around there, I was just poking around my local library, and saw his name on the spine of a book, and then kept looking. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another book by Cannell. My library had a giant long bookshelf full of Stephen J. Cannell novels. He wrote a lot of novels, and this was all post TV career. He had a whole second career as a novelist and wrote a lot of books. I checked a bunch of those books out of that library. I read several of his novels, and they're solid. They're fun, mystery, suspense, thriller kind of stories, and so they're around. So I would recommend it if people are impressed by this guy as a storyteller. You can get pure Cannell storytelling just right on the printed page. Check out his books.
Yeah, and there really is a place for, and I'm sorry we don't kind of have it anymore on TV, and I would like to see kind of a renaissance of it, but there is a place for just a popcorn junk food action TV show where your characters they may not be the deepest, but they're defined. They go on an adventure. You have a good time. The good guys win. The bad guys go into jail. I mean, that's the other. There's a feel-good feeling in that, and there's a place for that. It doesn't all have to be Game of Thrones or The Wire.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was always like a controversy nipping at the heels of the A-Team. I know it was a lot bigger in England than it was here, as far as like sort of the outrage over the showcasing of guns and how trivial it was. But at the same time, it's like you can't really ignore, if you're going to do an action series, like the fact that people have firearms. But at the same time, it was like, it's a lighthearted show, guys. Yeah, like people aren't going to get mowed down or anything. It's just like it's just part of the fun. You just see a lot of people trading fire, but nobody really gets hurt by it, And so to me, it's kind of like it's fine because it's make believe. So I mean, it's not anything to get too worked up about.
Yeah, the A-Team went through more munitions than the entire war, the entire landing in Normandy, and no one was ever shot. There were a lot of cars that flipped over.
Right. Well, that was the even funnier part is it's like these explosions that flip cars over, and then you see the people crawling out of the window, and you're like, okay, no, like maybe 1 in a million, but like, people regularly just crawling out of these things, no problems. They're just a little shaken. No.
They were professionals. The A-Team knew what they were doing. They knew if I'm going to aim a rocket launcher at a Jeep, it's going to strike in such a way that the Jeep will flip and everyone will safely dive out.
Yeah, at least once every other episode, the back of the van would fly open and there's Murdoch and he would be just mowing down.
Oh, and they'd stick their heads out the windows with their guns and shoot their machine guns out the back. And they did all that.
And the worst thing that would happen is the car would either crash or flip. And again, they always made sure we got that shot of, no, everybody's okay.
I think the other interesting thing to consider when you look at Stephen J. Cannell's career is, and this is something else that has changed. Obviously, the world of TV is so complete. We're in a whole new universe now where all the rules are out the window. But back then, that individual people like that could have such a massive impact on what millions of people, what everybody in America and even around the world was watching. That was based on just a handful of people, a handful of network executives like a Grant Tinker or a Fred Silverman or whatever. And then these producers, it was this tiny little club of guys that were responsible for everything. When you look at Stephen Cannell and Aaron Spelling and Glenn Larson and Kenneth Johnson, and there was just a few of them that just had their hands in so many shows for so many decades, and that everybody knew and everybody saw. So I think that's interesting. That things are so fragmented now, where now it's like there are whole networks and streaming whatevers that I've never even heard of, that you don't have that anymore. Which is that a good thing? Probably, but it's certainly a different thing anyway. And it's interesting in retrospect that just these individuals had such an impact.
Yeah, and not only was he such an impact, the fact I think very few producers get known. I couldn't tell you who produced The Streets of San Francisco. I couldn't tell you who the producers were of half the 80s shows that I watched and I loved. But I knew, even as a kid, I knew who Stephen J. Cannell was. Yep. And when we got to that end bit of the episode, where it did the pan around him as he's typewriter, we hear the music, it was like, I knew him and I knew Quinn Martin. Yes. Yeah, there we go. It's
I got my typing page right here. Right, there you go.
Which I think
it would flip into a letter C for Cannell.
Right. And I think I just messed myself up because I think Quinn Martin was Streets of San Francisco, which is the one I mentioned. But but at the beginning of every episode, Quinn Martin production, and then it was the da 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 da. Which I
mean the guys that were smart enough to just put their names on the shows, and especially for kids, when you look at Hanna-Barbera, Ruby Spears, Croft, these were guys' names. We knew their names because they slapped their names front and center on all those shows. And it's smart business, and it's certainly good at building your brand. And he was a smart guy, and he also, I saw him speak about that little ending shot of him with the typewriter and then flinging the page. That was intentionally done. That he just wanted to remind people, I'm a writer. This is where we're writing, we're telling stories, and so he wanted that kind of. I'm not mighty super producer. I'm a guy at a typewriter.
And as Lynn points out there, he overcame a disability.
Yes, he did. Yeah. Cannell was dyslexic. Lynn has been providing a lot of fantastic comments through this whole thing, we should say. So thank you, Lynn, for all of that. And Cannell, he would often work with typists to take care of printing out all his stuff and copying his things to to help deal with his dyslexia.
Yeah, I just feel bad for his assistant who had to gather up those pages and put them in order afterward.
He was
Every
flinging them
episode.
all over the room.
everywhere.
Every page, off it goes.
All right, so gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us talking about a TV legend. We could definitely go on more. I mean, like I said, every single one of these shows practically we could talk about for an hour. Well, maybe not, maybe not Hawkeye, but
I'm going to have to actually watch some Hawkeye before we do an hour. But
Right.
Wonder Woman in the French-Indian War, yes, I would very much like to see that.
yes. So if people want to hear more from you, Nathan, where can they find you?
You can find me on 42cast.com. That's where you can find the 42cast and my other two shows, Time Streams and Legendary Forces.
And Kevin, where in the world is your goofy stuff?
I guess the address is right about here. Flopcast.net is the main website for my show. Again, we're part of the ESO network, as is the 42cast. So you can find Nathan and I both if you just go to ESO network as well. And we're just being goofy and giggling over silly things from the past every week on the Flopcast. And again, it's our 10-year anniversary show is coming up in just about a week. So we really have a problem.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yes, indeed. And you can find me here, as always. You can find me here on the Twitter. You can find me with Joe every other Thursday at DragonCon itself. I have also got a new horror podcast that will be coming from Good to Be a Geek Media called A Podcast of Amontillado, launching very soon. And you can come back here in 2 weeks on the 19th, when we will be discussing Oof, Boff, Splat, the Subterranean Blue Grotto Essays on Batman 66, a panel discussing, oddly enough, the third season of the 1966 Batman show. Keith DeCandido, Jim Beard, a few other people, please come and watch us slide up and down our bat poles.
That pole dancing?
Yes, that is a euphemism.
Yes, indeed. So thank you very much for joining us. If you liked what you saw, please, if you're watching us on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, etc., etc., etc. And tune in to the next episode of the Flopcast, where you'll hear Kevin say,
the last 10 years have really been a huge mistake.
Good night. Yes, I want to end.